From one of the seven hills of Rome, it's easy to see why it's called the Eternal City. In the distance, ruins of ancient buildings, the palaces of the Caesars, over there, the Coliseum, and just around a bend in the Tiber River, St. Peter's Basilica. Then there's the Pantheon with its spectacular oculus. Everywhere, medieval churches and Renaissance buildings, mixed with modern architecture. The central part of Rome today is one big museum, and it attracts millions of tourists a year. But the cost of preserving all this is astronomical, and maintenance, like the city, eternal.
It's a constant job. Once they finish with restoration or cleaning of one side of the monument, they already have to start on the other side. It's a continuous job.
It's Angelo Bottini's job to make sure it gets done. But ask him if he's got the money to do it.
Assolutamente no.
Absolutely not, he says. We get some help from the state, but most of the money comes from selling tickets, and it's not enough, he says. Tourists do pay to get into the Forum. As the center of the ancient Roman Empire, it is a huge attraction, but most of the people who come here really don't know how lucky they are.
Because the buildings around here are roughly 2,500 years old, it's easy to think that it's always looked like this. Well, it hasn't. It was only about 150 years ago that these buildings were excavated.
After the fall of the Roman Empire, the Forum was forgotten and slowly buried as the centuries passed and the city grew. Archaeologists only started stripping away the layers in the 19th century. A piece of Rome's past glory was finally revealed, but Bryn Jenkins, a history professor, thinks it's a miracle it survived after it was uncovered.
When we came in '69, you could drive a car near the church across the way next to the Arch of Septimus Severus, and you could drive the car. The wall did not exist then. The road continued through here and then round the curve, and some years later they realized this was probably not very wise for the preservation of the Forum, with the cars driving through.
The Coliseum has survived through the ages because it's just so enormous. Hard to bury something like this, even though huge chunks of it were carted off as building material in the Middle Ages. But many significant monuments didn't survive. Take the story of Rome's pyramids. This one was built about 20 years before the birth of Christ, but few people know there was another pyramid in Rome, an even bigger one, and it was right about here, just down the road from the Vatican. It was destroyed in 1500 by Pope Alexander VI, and it's said marble from that pyramid is now part of the steps of St. Peter's. Later popes banned the destruction of ancient Roman buildings, and in recent years archaeologists have been turning up some amazing finds. 2 years ago, Clementina Pinella and her team uncovered a spectacular scepter, almost certainly, she says, from the 3rd century Roman emperor Maxentius.
Very happy, molto felice.
It's usually something we don't expect, she says. I've been doing this for years and years, but every time we find something, it's an incredible emotion. But not everything gets to be seen by the public because there simply isn't enough money to preserve and display all the things the archaeologists are finding. More than once, Pinella has had to cover up her work.
It's very frustrating.
These were originally the apartments in the winter of the Vestal Virgins themselves.
Russell Scott, an American history professor, has been digging around in the Forum for over 20 years and is just as frustrated.
It's surprising what you may be able to find, but then the question is, can anything be done to help preserve it, to treat it? And the answer here is there's no money for it.
Covering things up again protects whatever has been exposed from pollution and the weather, but it means what you see here today is probably what you're going to get for a long time to come. Physical reconstruction is just too expensive. But what about virtual reconstruction? This is a sophisticated computer model, and the experts say it's pretty close to what the city looked like at the height of the Roman Empire. Rome Reborn, it's called, and now available on Google Earth. So you don't just fly over the Coliseum, you fly into it.
Our model includes many of the interiors of the great public buildings and certainly of the Coliseum. We fully model all the stairways and corridors and the underground chambers that we see behind me.
It's hoped that tools like that from the digital world will generate interest and ultimately lead to more funding so that archaeologists can someday reveal and preserve more of the ancient world. For Worldfocus, I'm Martin Seemungal in Rome.